Melinda, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here with us. First of all, how are you? I haven't seen you in ages. How are you doing?
Ben, I'm doing absolutely fantastic, and I'm even happier now that I've seen you and the other Ben, and we are here in Kenya, which is just the most wonderful place to be.
We are. It's so nice. You know, I came here maybe 10 days ago, and we did a safari. We went to Masai Mara. We've been all over the shop. So it's been an intense experience, but a beautiful, beautiful country.
It is absolutely a beautiful country. I was in the Masai Mara 2 years ago, and I'm going back in a couple of days' time.
Oh, are you going after this?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to get distracted. Have you seen the Big Five yet?
I haven't seen the Big Five. I haven't seen rhinos yet.
Okay, we saw the rhinos. We didn't see a leopard.
I saw a leopard.
That means you got to do it again, right? It's so jarring.
But I haven't seen rhinos, and I really, really want to see rhinos.
I feel there's rhinos in your future. I feel there's a rhino in your...
There are rhinos in my future. There absolutely are.
Lest I get too distracted, we are here in Nairobi for TED Countdown. Super excited to hear you later on. Do you want to give us a bit of a sneak peek of what's coming?
Absolutely. I'm going to be talking about the work that I'm doing in Guyana and the fight against the oil in Guyana, and I'm going to be talking about some of our wins. But I'll probably talk about that today as well.
Yes. Wonderful. The work that you're doing in Guyana. So for people who are tuning in for the first time and listening here, this is not your first time with us. You were on the podcast with us before, and it was a pretty I don't know how you describe that. I was going to say light bulb, but it's not a light bulb moment. It was more like a cosmic explosion in my brain of like all of the possibilities of what can happen. I've started describing you as Batman, the Guyanese Batman. I feel like you're like a superhero. And I'm wondering if you would give, just for our listeners, like what made you choose litigation as your primary tool for climate action? Like, why is that the path that you chose to take?
Well, that's easy, Ben, because after all, I'm a lawyer. And so litigation is one of the things that lawyers do. But I suppose there's a deeper answer to this. And if you want to save the planet, and let's be serious here, we're talking about saving the earth. It's not just about the climate,
right? Because
climate breakdown is a symptom of a much deeper problem. We also have ocean acidification. Marine animals are dying. We have what people in the global north call biodiversity collapse, which we know as the extinction of our more than human family. So you've got all these things piling up. And a lot of this is attributable to things like global overheating and the pollution from the oil industry and the rest of the fossil fuel industry. So we're talking about saving the planet. And if you're going to do that, you have to stop the oil industry. And if you're going to do that, you have to use power. Not advocacy, not morality, not persuasion, not reason, power. And law is power if you know how to use it. And that's why litigation is the thing that I do. I'm a lawyer. I use law. It's power.
This is so interesting to me because it's a very different approach to like lots of the approaches that we hear on the podcast, which are about the art of communication, storytelling, persuasion in lots of cases. But I like this idea of like, sometimes you just got to use power, right? Sometimes it has to be accountability. It can't be trying to get people to do things out of the goodness of their heart. There has to be consequences. People have to know what the law says. People have to know what the rules of engagement are. And last time you were on the podcast, you were talking through some of the legal work that you were doing to challenge offshore oil production in Guyana. And that was really interesting for me because I think from what I remember, we were talking about Guyana being a carbon sink and them discovering a massive reserve of oil that they were then deciding they were going to be drilling down. I'm saying was it ExxonMobil?
ExxonMobil discovered oil offshore Guyana, and the government of Guyana has, in my opinion, stupidly, foolishly, and irresponsibly agreed to allow them to extract this oil.
Okay. That was going to be the question I was going to ask. Was 3 years later, 3 years later, what has been the effect of the work or the conversations that you're having, or I guess mobilizing that power or using that power in the way that you do?
So when I talk about using power, I'm really talking about this is in the context of the decision makers, so the fossil fuel industry and the government of Guyana. I know that people have very important work to do in terms of storytelling and so on, but that isn't directed against the directly against the fossil fuel industry.
Okay, right.
That is about trying to bring people to a space where they can fight the industry.
Right.
What we're doing is actually fighting against the oil industry up front. We're on the front line. And we've had a great 3 years. Let me just tell you some of the things that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a number of cases in court. I've now filed 10 cases against the oil, by the way. So we've had decisions from the courts, for example, that ExxonMobil Guyana Limited is liable for all the costs of cleaning up if there is a spill and restoring the environment and compensating people. The judge said that liability is unlimited, so that could cost billions of dollars. And then he said, well, ExxonMobil Guyana doesn't have the money to pay for that. So he ordered an unlimited parent company guarantee. In the 2 weeks following that decision from the judge, this is just 2 years ago, in the 2 weeks following the decision from the judge, ExxonMobil Corporation's share price went down by 12%.
Right, of course it did, because people were thinking, where's the money going to come from? Crazy.
So ExxonMobil Guyana has been ordered to produce insurance. The judges have said they were in breach of their permit. They have been told they have to comply with international law. They have to meet standards of transparency and accountability. Mm-hmm. There is a stay of the order for the unlimited parent company guarantee, but the judge said you've got to produce a guarantee in the meantime of $2 billion. We've had a judgment which says that environmental impact assessments now have to take into account the Scope 3 emissions from ExxonMobil's offshore drilling.
What's a
Scope 3
emission?
If you produce oil and then you sell it somewhere else, you still have to take into account that oil when it's burned further down the line.
Okay.
So when you look at oil extraction, you don't just say, well, this is the oil we burnt to get it. You have to say, and you don't just say this is the pollution that's come from the oil we burnt in order to get the oil out.
Right.
You have to take into account all of the pollution
that will be
from that oil, no matter where in the world it's burned.
Wow.
And that is actually 90% of the pollution that comes from the oil. Mm-hmm. I know people talk about emissions. We should stop talking about emissions. This isn't emissions. This is pollution. Mm-hmm. This is nasty greenhouse gas pollution that is overheating the planet. Why are people still talking about emissions? So anyway, we've got that decision, which means now it's going to be harder for the government to justify saying to ExxonMobil Guyana and any other oil company, you can go ahead and do oil. We're going to say, well, look at all the pollution. How does that work? Mm-hmm. In one of the cases, the judge said the pipeline permit was unlawfully granted.
Oh.
Yes. I think one of my favorite things coming out of the courts, though, is that from the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the apex court, there's no appeal from this. Mm-hmm. The judges said, basically, if you come to court to protect the environment and you're doing this in good faith and you lose, you should not have to pay the costs of the other side.
Yeah.
That's a huge step forward, because it means now people can go to court and they don't have to be frightened that they're going to be landed with a huge bill.
Right.
So that makes it much, much easier for people to fight against the oil industry.
So has that resulted in an increase of people coming forward to challenge?
It has. Unfortunately, we can't actually respond to all of those requests.
Right, okay.
Because we don't have the funding to pay the lawyers. And you've got to pay lawyers. I'm not using lawyers from civil society and NGOs. We use lawyers that are litigators and that know what they're doing. And right. I know that sounds harsh, but we've got to deal with the real world. This decision on the costs actually binds 5 countries already.
Right.
And which is phenomenal. And I think people in other countries can also use this. They should take this decision and say to their judges, look, we want the same impact. We want to be able to protect the planet and not be at so much risk. And, you may recall the Client Earth Shell case where they had an award of costs against them. That's, that wasn't good. Mm-hmm. Not good for protecting the climate. In terms of the other companies, so Hess and the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation, they are co-venturers with ExxonMobil in Guyana. The courts have said that actually Hess and CNOOC can't use their petroleum production license to produce oil.
Okay.
So they got the license, but they can't produce any oil under it.
Yeah.
And also, if they do that, that will be treated as a criminal offense committed by ExxonMobil, because only they have an environmental permit and they can't allow the other two to extract oil.
Melinda, it sounds like you got these guys on the ropes, man. You sound like you applied a lot of pressure over here, which is good.
I only wish. I mean, we need to apply far more pressure than we're doing. The courts have also said that, remember I said that ExxonMobil's got this liability and it's unlimited. The courts have said that Hess and CNOOC have joint and several liability with ExxonMobil.
Wow.
And what that means is, if Exxon doesn't pay up, Hess and CNOOC have to.
And is Hess and CNOOC the parent company?
Well, these are the companies, the offshore subsidiaries.
Okay, right.
And then there's a whole nother battle about parent company guarantees. So technically, Hess and CNOOC have unlimited liability because they have joint and several liability, and the courts have said that ExxonMobil Guyana has unlimited liability. I'm not sure that the parent companies know this, and I'm not sure that the shareholders know this.
Right. Because when they do, you're going to see another drop in those share prices.
That it would certainly be a matter of concern.
Yeah.
We've still got the biggest climate change case in the world going through the courts. The government of Guyana and ExxonMobil tried to strike it out, and they failed. So this case will now go to trial, and that's a very good thing. It's a case that's based on the right to a healthy environment, Article 149J of Guyana's Constitution. And I'm very pleased with this because I actually lobbied many years ago for a right to a healthy constitution for the right to a healthy environment to be put in the Constitution. And Parliament did that, and they put it in the fundamental rights section, which is brilliant, which means it's enforceable.
Okay.
So we can go to court on that. I'm also pleased that in one of our cases, the Caribbean Court of Justice, our highest court of appeal, referred to the Escazú Agreement on public participation and public access to information in environmental matters. And I worked on that very early on. And I'm also pleased that the Caribbean Court of Justice cited Article 36 of the Constitution, which says that the well-being of the nation depends on preserving clean air, fertile soils, pure water, and the rich diversity of ecosystems, etc. And I wrote that. So
couple throwbacks.
So it's nice to see that this work that I did in the past is having an impact now. And so, as I've said, we've had a great 3 years. I've got a super legal team, and I want to give a name check to two lawyers in particular. Tim Prudhoe, who's an English barrister with an excellent Caribbean practice, and Anna K. Elizabeth Brown, who is a lawyer from Jamaica, who is a superb junior counsel and better than any of her contemporaries that I have met anywhere, including her contemporaries in the United States and the United Kingdom.
Shout out to Tim and Anna, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 years on, we have been beating ExxonMobil and we have been beating the government of Guyana. And big change, the Guyanese people understand now that oil is a curse.
Right.
And of course, people are going to take the sponsorship money from ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
Why not? People need to live. But people are ready for an alternative. They're ready for 100% renewable energy. They're ready for protected areas, and they're ready for a proper deal on carbon credits, not the deal that the government has struck and which I have written about. And I've actually written to the president and told him that his carbon credits deal is with using Amerindian lands is unconstitutional. It's a violation of the rights of Amerindian property rights. This is such interesting stuff. There's such a good list of things, of achievements that you've had. And I'm wondering, in terms of like the tangible change that this causes, what does it actually do? Does it mean that, like, are we talking about people ended up in prison here? Are we talking about slowing down people who are trying to drill for oil? Like, what's the actual tangible impact of all of these different cases that are in the court at the moment? Well, I think the obvious answer is that we're making it more difficult. And when you make it more difficult, it means that it's going to take longer. And things that take longer also cost more money. I mean, basically, Ben, the oil industry is not viable. Right. Okay, it's been subsidized to the tune of $7 trillion in 2023. Remove those subsidies and the industry will collapse, and renewable energy will outcompete fossil fuels immediately. And so the problem that we have is the subsidies, and we just have to keep on fighting until we can attack those subsidies directly, which is actually a case I want to do. Right.
Right. And so in terms of taking on all of these, because for me, this is the bit where it becomes a little bit techie. It becomes a little bit scary in my mind, because I would be thinking, if I was you, I would be nervous about challenging these big institutions, these big companies, these big players. We went to see Kyoto in the theatre, which was a really interesting play about the Kyoto Agreement. Was it in the first COP? Was it the first COP? Yeah. And they depicted this group, I think they were called the Seven Sisters, as this like shadowy group of people that kind of just appear out of the darkness and like intimidate people and stuff. And I'm wondering, like, in terms of the resistance that you're facing, doing all of this work, pushing all of this stuff through, are you feeling, is it like a present thing in the front of your mind? Are you aware of it? Do you feel that kind of resistance, or is it like much more abstract?
Well, there's obviously going to be resistance to the work that I'm doing. You know, the usual, the government is in court and they tend to put forward the same sort of arguments as Exxon does. Exxon obviously not going to be happy. So, you know, they're in court too.
Right.
Yeah. And the government criticizes me on their channels, but I say, look, you know, I believe in free speech. They can say whatever they like. But what they can't do is expect me to listen to it, and they can't expect me to read it. And I'm certainly not going to respond to it because I got more important things to do.
Right.
I think that's about as far as I can go.
And what keeps you motivated to keep on going? I feel like last time we spoke, one of the big revelations was that one of the big reasons that you do this work is because this is where you're from, right? This is your heritage. These are your people. This is your culture in some sense. But what is it that keeps you going, waking up every day and looking at the books and doing the work?
So the short answer, Ben, is this is what I do. It's who I am. And on one level, it's that simple. But of course, it's not that simple. What keeps me going is kindred spirits. So my partner, my animals, my plants, my friends, my colleagues, the rain, the smell of the rain, the dawn chorus of the birds, the night lullaby of the frogs, the unconditional love of my dogs, the arrogance and demands of my cats, and
Yeah.
it's the life that surrounds us that keeps us going. Not the theatres, not the restaurants, not the cafes, not the bars, not the museums, which are generally full of dead stuff or stuff that's been looted from other people, depending on which museum you're in. None of that stuff. It's the connection with life that keeps us all going. And I think in the global north in particular, people are so disconnected from nature that, you know, they're really not able to understand what it is that we are really about, and that what we're fighting for, the things that have meaning for us don't exist in the global north.
Yeah. And very difficult, right, to argue when the argument is based around money, it's based around economy, it's based around finance. Very difficult to argue with somebody who's arguing about their cats, like arguing about things that they love, things that they feel, things that affect them in real time.
Of course, I mean, if you want money, just print it. Money, you know, it's just about confidence. It's not any more backed up by anything tangible. It's not backed by gold. Just print more money. And of course, I shouldn't say that, because really what I'm saying is confidence can collapse and so can the economy. It's not real. But the things that are real are the things that we need to protect. A whale. Well, how can you put a price on a whale? And actually, I know that Ralph Shami, formerly from the IMF, has done absolutely brilliant work on valuing natural capital, because, as he says, and I agree with him, if this is what people understand, then we've got to show them
the cost.
We've got to show them this in terms of money, when we really know that actually whales have intrinsic value, and we should not be slaughtering whales because we don't have any right to do that. You know, let's look at Norway, which presents itself as a, you know, very green country, one of the biggest exporters of oil, trashed the global climate system, historically one of the biggest killer of whales. Are they going to put those whales back? Are they going to take that pollution out of the atmosphere? I mean, what we face is this complete inability for the countries that have done the damage to accept responsibility for what they have done and to heal the planet, to repair the damage, and to bring about their own reconciliation with the earth. And that's what they need to do. And that's why they find it so hard to keep going, because they're disconnected.
I always find it so interesting when I talk to you. Whenever we chat, I find myself sitting here going, sometimes I halfway through the point, I don't even know what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. Take Norway. I was like, yeah, Norway is trash, but I have no idea. But I think I love the way that you speak about this, because you're clearly so passionate about it, and it's clear this is not just a job for you, right? This is not just turning up to work. This is something that you really, or to me it feels like it's something that you really believe in. I'm wondering, I'm going to give you 2 questions to kind of wrap up here before we finish off. Number 1 is, are there any ways that your work in the legal sector or in the legal domain you feel is connected to other people's work in other areas, other disciplines? So maybe technology or grassroots activism or anything else that you feel is relevant. Do you see any parallels between the ways of working there?
I think there are some people out there that are in different fields to me that are doing absolutely fantastic work. Too many to list. But I would say, for example, someone like James Hansen, who is a real scientist, the work that he does is brilliant and inspiring, way beyond what is being produced by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I know everybody cites the IPCC, but just bear in mind, the IPCC, some of those authors work for the fossil fuel industry. And the IPCC doesn't do any science.
I'm like, they do. I have no idea.
Well, you just go on. No, they do. They do.
Right.
ExxonMobil boasts about the fact that some of their scientists are working on the IPCC reports.
That is crazy.
Of course it is. And they don't do any science. What they do is they do a survey of reports and research that have been done by other people, including all the research funded by the fossil fuel industry. So when you get an IPCC report, it's the absolute best case scenario, because it's also got all this stuff funded by the fossil fuel industry. It's not science.
Right.
It's a literature survey.
Right.
People like James Hansen and his team are actually doing science, and so they've reached very different conclusions. James Hansen now says we need to move from all this talk about, net zero and 1.5 to stay alive. Forget that. That's gone. We need to move to negative emissions, which means that everybody on the planet, every single country on the planet now needs to be like Guyana and become a carbon sink. That's pretty inspirational if you're Guyanese.
Yeah.
We are the climate leaders.
Yeah.
People should look at us and say, okay, great, that's what these people are doing. Let's forget about the leadership from the United States, which historically and currently is the biggest polluter, or the EU or the UK or Canada or Australia, all these big historic polluters. Leadership, I mean, they're leading us to destruction. Let's be realistic. Look at us. We're a carbon sink. Take back ExxonMobil and all this oil production, because it's going to be used in the global north, not by us. And Hansen's work is very inspirational. It gives us a different conceptual framework. There are many authors that I read that are also very good. It's just too many people, really, to list, and I think I've probably done others a disservice, but by just choosing a scientist. But the science is reality.
It's clear, yeah,
and it's clear.
Yeah.
It's reality.
Necessary. And I think that this is one of the things that I've definitely learned over our time of doing this podcast, is that there is a ecosystem, no pun intended, of people doing this work in loads of different ways for loads of different reasons, and it can't change unless everybody is doing their part, which I think is again a very inspiring message. And maybe to finish up here, my last question is, there are going to be young lawyers who are listening to this podcast episode. There are going to be young activists who are listening to this podcast episode. And I want to know from you what you would say is the most crucial piece of advice that you can offer for effectively using legal systems to protect the environment and secure justice, climate justice for communities and for the planet.
I was dreading this question because my answer is very harsh. And it's this: if you want to protect the planet, then you have to master law, and that takes years. And if you're a young lawyer, you're not going to be able to do it. You've got to learn, and you've got to learn law. You've got to learn black letter law. Of course, you have a moral framework. You love the environment, or you want to do the right thing. that is all very well and good, but that does not belong in a fight. Your clients are paying you to use your brain to win. They're not paying you for your heart and your moral certainty and all the rest of it.
Right.
And that's very difficult sometimes for people in this space to understand. It's hard work and it's difficult and it's tough and you just have to keep going. And for activists, I would say, look, has activism actually worked? Do we need to rethink advocacy? Because in the last 30, 40 years, how many billions of dollars have been spent on activism? And what has it actually achieved? That's a very tough question. I don't have the answer. My own view is that it has not achieved what people promised that it would achieve. And a lot of the time it has clouded the issues. I mean, we have a whole thing about, climate justice. Okay, that raises another question. Whose justice? Because climate justice in the global north, I can tell you, it looks very different to climate justice in the global south, where people are on the front line, where people are dying because of floods, because where animals and plants are dying, where our forests are burning, and where our resources are being extracted to continue the privileged consumerist lifestyle of the global north. And where there has been no recognition of the ecocide and the genocide that have brought us to the edge of climate catastrophe, biodiversity collapse, and really what the UN, who finally woken up, describe as an existential threat. There is an existential threat to life on Earth, not just people. So when we talk about climate justice, I want to know what that means for people. And I would say to young activists, you have a lot of learning to do in the global north, but you also have a lot of unlearning to do because of this weight of propaganda or brainwashing or whatever you want to call it. Face up to the past, face up to what has happened, and take responsibility. Learn your history. And then I think people are in a much, much stronger position.
Melinda, I don't know why you're dreading that question. That was such a good answer to the question. And I think sometimes people just need permission. People need to know that it's okay to really master a craft, to spend your time. If you're thinking, I've got 10 years, you want to spend that 10 years mastering the craft, that's a worthwhile pursuit. If you want to talk about people facing up to the realities and of the history, facing up to the realities of the places they live, of the impacts of the behaviors of themselves, of their countries, of their nation states, whatever it is, I think that that's such an important message. And I'm sure that it's one that's not easy to hear, not easy to receive, but very necessary. And luckily for all of our young lawyers and young activists, there are loads of other episodes to listen to as well with very different answers, so you can look into those episodes also. But Melinda, I want to say thank you so much for honouring us and giving us your time, for coming and sitting with us and for explaining these things to me as somebody who doesn't always understand everything, and being so clear and concise, and sharing all of those wins with us. It's been a massive pleasure.
Thank you, Ben. It's always wonderful to be on Climate Curious. You're brilliant hosts, and no, you ask fantastic questions, which tells me you have actually mastered the subject.
Points to producer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to your talk.
I will look out for you.
Thank you for joining us this week. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please hit the follow button to make sure that you get next week's releases. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and a review.
Now, let's shout out to our fabulous team behind the pod.
Executive produced by Josie Colter.
Produced by Ben Beheshty.
Music also by Ben Beheshty.
Communications by Tara Cooper and Issey Gladston.
Curation by Deesha Chandra.
Hosted by Ben Hurst.
And Maryam Pasha.
And remember,
stay curious.